Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a project breakdown of a sort of 85 BPM chill lo-fi type track that I've made. And hopefully in this video you do learn a few production techniques. I hope it's helpful. But with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and play the track in full, and then we'll go ahead and go into a breakdown of how each part of it is made. So here is the track from scratch. Okay, so that's the project I did make here that we're going to be breaking down today. And we are going to start from the very first thing I did when I was creating this track, which was this bit at the very beginning with the piano. Now you can see if we go into the piano roll here, we do have this little thing of strumming going on. This is something you could draw in manually, but FL actually has a feature to do this for you, which is what I used. So starting off, I'm actually going to go ahead and duplicate my piano so I can demonstrate how I did this. We'll pull the chords from another instance where they're straight, so that way this will make more sense. Originally, when I drew in the chords, they looked like this, just straight chords, and if I do play those, you'll see. So this is how I had it at the beginning, but I decided I wanted to use strumming. So here's how you do that right in FL. This is a really cool technique, and I think for a track like this will make it even more exciting. I went into the drop-down menu over here, that's right next to this little wrench icon. Now, for some reason, when I'm recording, you can't actually see the menu that comes up here. I'm hovering over it, but on the screen itself, it looks like there's nothing there. Not too sure why that happens, but all you're looking for under this drop-down is a menu called Tools, and then underneath that one, there is one called Strum. When you click on that, this will come up. Now, you could go ahead and mess with all of these knobs to change the kind of sound you get. And of course, you could preview it in real time to see what you're going to get. So for example, very, very cool feature. I like that one quite a bit. So of course, with some tweaking, we got the result that I do use in this track, which again on its own sounded like this. I thought that was a really nice touch. I also took a top loop that I got from a Cymatics pack, and that simply sounds like this. It was at 75 BPM, so I did stretch it to the 85 that this track is at. And that had some really nice top end that's still kind of low quality intentionally, which is of course sort of what we're going for here. And I also really liked this sound here. Nice low quality snare clap sort of thing. I ended up keeping that for the drop section of this track as well. Didn't even replace it with its own thing, just left that as is. Moving on to the next section, this is meant to be sort of like a build-up before we do have the biggest moment of the track coming in at bar 9. I added, on top of this piano and on top of this drum loop, a really weird like ARP synth thing that I put together in Serum, and I'll explain how that was done as well. So it sounds like this, and if we take off the effects for a second, originally with nothing on it, it sounded like this. Very mad sound. What it's actually doing, if we look in the piano roll for that, it's following the chords yet again, but I used a cool feature in Serum. If you go to this settings menu here, there is a very nice ARP feature that you could select here and then adjust the timing. So for example, I had it go to here, and because we're trying to make something that sounds super chill, laid back, I added some effects to take off a lot of the very high top end. So first I'm multiband compressing it with a thing of OTT, and after that we do have an instance of Pro Q3, which is my preferred EQ of choice, just cutting off all the unnecessary lows and some of the low mids as well, and then as I say, getting rid of anything that's super high at top. Following that, we do have a reverb plugin, just because I wanted to put this sound in a bit of a space. And then at the very end, I do have another EQ. This is what really makes it sound the way it does. If we take this one off, you see it still kind of sounds premium, it still has a good amount of top end, but this is the one that kind of adds like a telephone filter and makes it sound very, very reduced in terms of its presence. But for the positioning of that element, super far in the background like that, that is exactly what you want. And again, as you can see, this is a very minimalistic project. That's all there is to it for this intro section. It was just those three elements, the piano, the drums, and that weird ARP synth. So now getting into how I built out the drop of this track. First thing we're going to look at is the drums. Again, as I say, I kept this top loop that we got from before. But of course, seeing as this is a drop, we've now added a kick drum, we do have sidechain as well. And all there is right here is this one little crash cymbal that I actually cut off moments after it starts, just to give the drop originally some impact. So, drums sound like this. Very minimal, as I say. There's not much going on. The kick is something that doesn't really have too much of a top-end presence. It's super low, and it blends really nicely with that top loop that we have. And with that out of the way, we could go into the next element we add, which is our 808. Now for this, I didn't do any sound design at all. I actually just took a one-shot, made sure I had the correct key selected, which you could do by going into this menu. Typically, a sample will tell you the key it's in. This one is in D. So the default root note it will select is a C. You just simply right-click on the one that's correct, and that will tune it correctly. And then I went and drew in a bass line, which sounds like this. Now, if you don't know much about how to do a good bass line, this is really just following the chords. Like, the root note of each chord, goes like this. And then I'm just doing simple octave jumps and occasionally an extra note or two. And that's really how that was written, and this plays quite nicely with the drums that we do have as well. If we do mute this layer for sidechain, you can see the kick and the 808s are actually going to be interfering with each other, which you can see. You get this weird distortion when that happens, which will clean up very nicely if you simply sidechain. I do have an in-depth sidechain tutorial on my channel, which you can check out using the card on screen. But from there, the next thing we did is we added in that piano from the intro yet again, which sounds like this. And one thing I do really want to emphasize and point out here, you notice throughout all of this, there's not really much happening in the super high end of the track. It mainly exists, lows, mids, and some very early highs, but there's not much after that, and that's a stylistic choice which I think fit this really well. And then of course we do have our lead sound. This one, probably one of the most simple sounds I've ever made, but I think it sounds great. It's just a sine wave with some Aircan noise on Serum, and I'm just sending that through a very high resonant filter, which gives you a bit of extra tone. So if I open that up, there's also some vibrato going on. I kept this incredibly dry as well. There's no reverb on there or anything until we get into a harmony that I add using the same sound later on in the track. So if we go to that here, that's actually this layer. Using the same sound, and then I also added in a cool little sine pluck that, as I say, is heavily reverbed to give it a bit of emphasis. So play all those together. I really like this because the choice of notes that we're using in this melody as well as the chords itself give it this sort of eerie feeling, which I thought was super interesting. It's not something I explore too often, and really I think I should because it gives you some really cool results. So as you can see, we've already gone through every element we have in this little portion of the track here. So if we unmute everything, play those together. You see, that simple, we do have a very cool usable beginning of a track here. It gives us a nice little intro, build up, and we have our first drop. Obviously, this is a super short project because I only have the bare minimum building blocks for those portions, but if you're making a full track, that's when you start going into things like adding other elements, copy and pasting some sections with variation to make a drop 2, or a build up to, something like that. But in a very quick and easy way, this is how I made this tune. And it was just a simple thing of very easy sound design coming together, and I think this made it sound quite nice. Of course, into mastering, I'm just using a clip shifter. I've already talked about in previous videos how I go about mixing, where I kind of keep my loudest elements of the track sitting near 0. So if we listen to, say, the busiest section but without drums, that would actually be right here. We take off that clipper. You see it's sitting right under 0, it's not really going over. And then if we look at where our drums are, which are just these layers here, same deal. It's hitting right around 0, not necessarily going over, and that means if you throw a clip shifter or a limiter like Ozone on it and just set it to 0 threshold, you're gonna get something that just trims off any peaks, because if we take that off, see it's just barely going over, not really though. This isn't a particularly loud track. That just solves that issue and makes mastering nice and easy. But that is a quick breakdown of how I made this track. I hope this video has helped you out and taught you a few production techniques. If it did, let me know in the comments. And also let me know, because this is a track I'm really excited about. What do you think should happen next in this track, like additional sections? Do you have any feedback? Because this is something I'd love to work on and make a more full version. But if you enjoyed the video, be sure to drop a like and subscribe for more content like this, and I'll see you in the next one.